Okay, so in our code previously, we were able to count down, and we have this if statement. If this condition is met, then we're going to alert blast off, and we're going to reset our variable to 10, and it's going to count down again and keep cycling through that process. So now what we're going to do is we'll comment this out. So I'm going to move that slash asterisk slash to the end of this. So all of that is going to be ignored by the browser when we run this function. And we're going to do something new. We had a local variable here. This answer again. This variable is going to exist only during this when this function is called. As soon as it gets to the closed curly brace, that memory is lost, and we don't have access to answer anymore. Number, on the other hand, is a global variable. We have access to this, and the data that is stored in there will stay in memory until the web page is refreshed or closed. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a third type of variable, and that is it's a list. The technical term is actually an array. At Google Classroom, there's a link that will eventually get to Clifford Shares' code, and this slide here is the code that you're going to want. You can just copy that, and we'll put that in, make this a global variable as well. All right, so this is going to be a global array, which is a list. The way that this works is I have a variable here. It is it's called my list, and there are slots, and I can put data into each slot. The number of slots is going to be a function of how do I fill it. In JavaScript, I can add to that. That's not something that can be done in other types of arrays. So this one is going to have a length of 4. Each slot is going to be indexed and have its own value. So in the first slot, Anne is going to exist. In the second slot, Bob, Kathy, and so on. And what's a little different here is that to create this list, I use square brackets. So parentheses are used to define functions. Curly braces are used to identify blocks of code. Square brackets are used for lists. So if I wanted to access a given element in my list, I need to use a number for that index. And it makes sense that this would be the first and the second and the third, but no, these lists start at 0. So Anne is the first element. That's going to be my list at 0. To get Bob, that's going to be my list at 1, and so on and so forth. So the last element of a list is always equal to the length of the list minus 1. So there are 4 elements in here. The length of the list is 4, but 4 is going to be outside of this. So if I wanted to alert, I could alert the whole thing and alert my list. And if I were to do that, I'm going to be alerting this. It's going to be looking for a variable called my list, which is defined up here. It's global, so it will find it, and it's going to output all of these guys all jam-packed together as one fell swoop. Right. So if I come back over here to my tester, refresh, and click, there they all are. There's the 4 elements of my of that list. If I wanted to get a given element, say the first one, that is going to be indexed at 0. So I use the square brackets and then identify the number that corresponds to that particular element. So if I want to grab the first element, that's going to be 0. The second is going to be 1, 2, 3, and so on until I get to the length of the list. So this should be just Anne that gets displayed. So that's good. 3 is the last element, 1 less than the length. So that should be Doug. And just to prove my point, we've just got to refresh. And there's Doug. So what happens if I put in a value that is not there? So if I put in 4, 4 is outside the length of this. So it's beyond there isn't a slot number 4. The last slot is number 3. So if I refresh this, I'm going to get this undefined. So if undefined comes up, it means that I'm trying to access my list. There's no slot for that particular value. If I put in a negative value, the same thing's going to happen. All right, so it's going to be undefined. Why? Because there is no -1 slot. It's not defined. Right. Okay, so that's good. Well, what if I wanted to cycle through? And what we're going to do is we're going to create some code that is going to display images, and we're going to look at the first and then the second and the third. So I already have this value here, so I'm going to use that as a guide. So I can do this. I'm going to say I want to alert instead of a given value. I'm going to alert number. So number is equal to, well, there it's equal to 10. I'm going to change that back to 0. Now it's equal to 0. And that too, now it's going to be outputting and. And every time that I click on it, it's going to be and. And that's great, but that's going to get boring. So after I do that alert, maybe what I want to do then is increment number +1. Oops. That's not what I want to do. That's what I want to do. So it's going to be number +1. So now what's going to happen is these are both global variables. So the only code that is currently running is alert number. So it starts at 0, so it's going to alert and. The number is going to increment. So now number now goes from 0 to 1. That's the end of that function. When I click a second time, it's going to access not, oops, there we go. It's going to alert number. Well, number is now 1. So instead of outputting and, it's going to output Bob. Number is going to increment to 2, and so on and so forth. So that will go through. I'm not changing, I'm only incrementing, so it's only going up. Got to refresh. And then, yep, it still is and. Why are we doing that? Because I haven't saved it. Save, refresh. There's Ann. Now there's Bob. And it'll keep on going through. That's all fine. And here's Doug. And if I go one more time, then I get the undefined. So similar to what we did here, when we got to 0, we reassigned number back to its starting point, back to 10. So I can do the same sort of thing here. I could say if, and put in some question marks, if a condition is met, I want to do something. Right, so what is that condition? Well, I want to see if the condition is, if it's greater than 4, I'm sorry, greater than 3, if number is greater, oops, not that either, that, if it's greater than 3. So 4 is outside of the loop. Doug is at position number 3. And so if number is greater than that, then I want to reassign number back to 0. So that's a single equal sign. I'm going to assign number to 0. If I save that and refresh, I got this one. Doug, Bob, Kathy, Doug, and back to Ann. So I can keep doing this all day long, and it's just going to keep cycling through multiple times. And I now have access to all elements of this, and we've got success. All right, very cool.